I have a great teacher for you today. In fact, this teacher, he's been here probably the last 3 summers to teach, but the last time he was here, it was a reminder to all of us of why we have a children's ministry. So if there's kids in the room, I'm just warning you, you never know what you're gonna get with this next guy. This is what happened last time.
Sovereign. This is Rainbow Dash, and Rainbow Dash is going to bear the penalty, the metaphorical symbol of what will happen if I do not keep my promise. All right? Are there any children? No? All right. Let's make sure. Here we go. Pull it taut. Pull them taut. Yep, there it is. Oh, there.
But we thought we'd bring him back anyways. Dave is actually now the author of a book called The Grown-Up's Guide to Teenage Humans. He's also a pastor across town at WestGate Church. Great teacher. Welcome him back, Dave Tieche.
Oh, man. If that sticks around and I become known as the My Little Pony pastor, I'm going to be very disappointed. That was a gift for you, and you abused it. Welcome. I'm so glad to be here, so honored to be here at Church on the Hill. My name's Dave Tieche, and when I was little, Darth Vader lived in my closet. I don't know why you're laughing. It's not funny. It was very deadly. In fact, this is a fact. If my father had not shut the bedroom closet door in my room, I would be standing here before you today dead. Because Darth would have killed me. I was terrified of him. Also, monsters lived under my bed. Very dangerous bedroom situation growing up. If I wanted to go to the restroom in the middle of the night, I had to jump out of bed, and because otherwise, if I just put my feet down, the monsters would grab my ankles, just drag me under the bed, and the next morning, all my parents would find would be a bloody, tattered pair of Superman pajamas. It's a little dark. Sorry. Yeah, a little dark. I don't know if this is you. I was afraid of a lot when I was a kid. I was scared of monsters. In fact, the scariest movie I ever watched all the way through high school was a movie called Alien. Hate it. Hate it, hate it. If we're friends on social media and you try to be funny and post a picture of Alien, I will unfriend you and block you. Scared, terrified. And so when I was a senior in high school, actually, my high school band got invited to this competition, went down to Florida. And while we were at Florida, we went to Universal Studios. And it was really fun. They had all this theme park. And there was a girl, Layla. And I was trying to figure out how I could get Layla go on a ride or something and with me. But every single time it didn't work. And then finally on this ride, this roller coaster ride, kind of a view of all Universal Studios, kind of fun movies, finally the numbers worked out, and I was like, hey, look, Layla, there's just you and me left, car number 4. So we're going, and it's and I'm so stoked, right, because I'm trying to be funny and all this kind of stuff. I'm sitting there, and they're Godzilla comes out, oh, Godzilla, and then King Kong, oh, and then, the T-Rex, oh, big T-Rex, and then Jaws, oh, big shark. And then we kind of go into Space Locker. What's going on? And there's all this mist, and I'm kidding you, right out of the 4th car, right there, right on this side of me, the alien just goes, rah, comes out. So I scream. Like a 13-year-old girl at a Taylor Swift concert. I was so terrified, I stood up and broke the restraining bar. Just broke the restraining bar, stripped the bolts, climbed over Layla, right? And all of a sudden the ride stops. The lights come on, a voice comes over the loudspeaker, please sit down in the car, please take your seat. And I'm like, I will take my seat when that thing goes away. In space, no one can hear you scream. But that summer in Florida, everyone heard me scream. The point is, when I was a kid, I was led to believe by movies and TV and everything that if evil were to ever show up in my life, if evil were to ever come to town, I would be able to see it, it would be terrifying, and I would run from it. That's what I thought evil was like. But if the Bible is to be believed, and I believe it is, then that's not the way evil works. Often evil comes in ways that are far more subtle and therefore far more dangerous. Evil comes in a way that is far more seductive. Evil is described in the Bible in a number of ways. In Peter, the Apostle Peter describes evil as a roaring, prowling lion looking for somebody to devour. In the book of Genesis, very early in the story, God comes to Cain and says, "Sin's like a crouching tiger outside your door, a crouching beast. It wants to devour you." Why the metaphor for the big cat? I think it's because big cats hunt by stealth. And they work best when you don't even see them coming. This is how evil works. Evil does not appear in your bedroom like a 6-foot mutant bat with blood dripping from its fangs going, "Evil!" That's what I thought. It's not the way it works. It's often far more seductive and far more subtle. In fact, in the story in Scripture we're going to look at today, there's a man being stalked by evil. It's there in the tall grass. It is coming. Jesus tries to share with this man that he is being stalked and then offers a way out, and this man doesn't take it. He literally looks Jesus in the face, turns, and walks away from Jesus. So, in our time together, we're going to examine this. What is this threat? Why is it so deadly, so dangerous? And then what you and I can do to get free of it. So first, we have to go to the threat and to the story. It's there in Matthew chapter 19. It's the story of the rich young ruler. I'm going to read the story, and then we are going to get into it. Matthew 19. Just then a man came up to Jesus and asked him, "Teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life?" "Why do you ask me about what's good?" Jesus replied. "There's only one who's good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments." Now, before we get into this is really fascinating because this story is in actually 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It made such an impression on these authors that they included it. This man was not just wealthy, but he had political power. He had power in the community. He was an ancient Elon Musk, if you will, and I will. He shows up to Jesus and he says, "Jesus, there's something different about you. I have been in civic life, in public life, in business life my whole life, and there's something fundamentally different about you, Jesus. And I don't know what it is. You speak with an authority. You talk about reality as if there's more than what we see, and something resonates with me." Maybe that's what he meant. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe he was a Jewish guy. It looks like he was, and he's just saying, "You know, Jesus, I know that I'm not right with God." You ever felt that way? You ever felt that you're not just right with God? There's a vacuum, a hole, something driving you. It's a uneasiness. As my wife used to say before she met Jesus, that she didn't feel right in her own skin. You ever felt that way? Well, of course you have. You're in church, right? But the point is, right, we know what that's like, right? Maybe that was going on. Anyway, this guy comes up to Jesus and says, I need to know what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Now, this guy didn't understand. This guy, and Jesus is going to destroy this guy's question because the question itself is actually kind of weird. He thinks that life with Jesus is something you add to your life, like salt. You know, like, what do I need to do to add? How can I make my life a little bit better? Life with Jesus is not something you add to your life. Just like Frodo did not add the Lord of the Rings trilogy to his life. It wasn't just something extra. It defined Frodo. Lord of the Rings? Okay. I'll back off that analogy. We'll go some other place. You know what I mean, right? And he thought that life with Jesus was something you do. But life with Jesus isn't something you do. It's something you become. But he didn't know that, so this is where he is. So Jesus says to him, you got to keep all the commandments. Now, what commandments is Jesus talking about? Well, they're the 10 commandments, the ones that you and I are familiar with. The ones given by God to Moses on the top of Mount Sinai that reveal not only the nature and character of this beautiful God and how he is different than every other God in Egypt, but also what his heart is for his people, how he wants his people to live. These are beautiful articulations of incredible freedom. They're not restrictive, they're beautiful. And this is what God gives to Moses. These are the 10 Commandments. And so out of this man says, well, I've kept them all. I've kept all of them. And this is where we know this guy is in trouble. So Jesus continues on. He's like, all these I have kept. What do I still lack? And Jesus said to him, if you would be perfect, if you want this life with God, go, sell all you possess and give it to the poor, and then you'll have treasure in heaven, and then come follow me. When the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, or in some translation, the word sorrowful means deeply grieved, for he had great possessions, many possessions. So what's going on here? What is happening? This verse, I think, is tying back to a moment in the 10 Commandments, the 10th commandment. I think this verse, Jesus is talking about the 10th commandment. And he's saying this is super dangerous and you must pay attention. Ten cuidado. This is very important. You must pay attention. Because the 10th commandment is one that we don't even pay attention to. But I think this verse is about the 10th commandment. Let me explain why. And it's going to have a lot of work with it, so stay with me. Commandment number 10 you're familiar with. Like, thou shalt not covet, right? You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servant. There's a pool boy joke in there somewhere. His ox or donkey or anything that belongs to his neighbor. It's pretty simple. Don't covet. But the problem is the word covet is weird. We don't use the word covet. Like, that's a strange word. So let's look at what the word covet means. It's from the Hebrew. The Hebrew word for this word covet is the word chamed. It means to see something and then to desire it greatly. Now, the word chamed appears very early in the story, on like page 3 of the Bible, when the talking snake comes to woman and says, God's holding out on you. You think he's good. You think he's created this great paradise. That's what he's told you, but he's lying. And this word, chamed, appears very early in the story. It appears in Genesis chapter 3, where this story it says, when the woman saw chamed, the fruit, when she saw the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also chamed for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. So this is a crucial plot point in the narrative. This is the moment where humans see and take. They see something they want and they take. And that word for see and desire is the word covet, chamad. That's what this word is. This is very important. And it's the foundations of our fall. It's the foundations of why humans are off. Because we see and we grab, but what we see and grab is not always good for us. And the things we think will bring us life do not. This is the human condition. But this word chamad, this word covet, is very important in the narrative. This is a crucial plot point. But it's a weird word because covet is weird. Covet, it's a strange word. First of all, covet also is different than all other of the 10 commandments, if you think about it. All the other 10 commandments have to do with external actions. But covet's weird. Covet's internal, isn't it? Covet has to do with an internal disposition, not an external action. Think about it. Keeping the Sabbath, that's an action. Dishonoring your mom and dad, that's an action. Killing, adultery, actions. Theft, action. Bearing false witness in a court of law, an action. These are all actions, right? But this one is not an action. It's something inside. Which kind of relates it back to another commandment, which is very unique, the very first one. The very first one, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Right? That has to do with your heart disposition. And it relates to that famous verse in Deuteronomy, the Shema. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Remember that one? This is the core. This is the first commandment. So the first commandment and the 10th commandment are actually sort of linked. They are all internal dispositions. They have to do with your heart. They have to do with where you're leaning, what's going on inside. Because the Bible is not God. God is not really interested as much in our external actions as he is in our internal drive. Because you get the internal drive right, you get your external actions right. And Jesus talks about this at length. We'll talk, and all the commandments really are about internal, but on their face, they look external. So in this one, covet is a weird word. It has to do not with an action, but with something underneath, something deeper, because the Bible is always interested in not shallow surface, but deep. But the word covet is strange. We don't use the word covet. You don't hear this in your office. It's not like, oh, Jim, I covet thy cinnamon raisin bagel. No, Dwight, repent thee, lest thee fall and burn. Oh, Panero, why dost thou vex me so? We don't see that. So there's another word that the word covet is often translated as in the Old and New Testament. And it's a word that we're more familiar with. Covet is often synonymous with the word greed. Now, greed we know, but here's the weird thing about greed. In our modern world, greed isn't even seen as bad. It's not a vice. Gordon Gekko, 1980 something, right? Greed is good, right? This is what our whole economy is built on. So how is this a dangerous spiritual thing? How is this deadly? But I think if we have eyes to see and ears to hear, we can see that this 10th commandment is linked somehow to this rich young ruler. It's linked somehow to greed. It's linked somehow to coveting. And it's so deadly, it can actually cause us to stare Jesus in the face and then turn and walk the opposite direction. So what's going on? And to explain this, I need to use one of the most famous album covers in the history of rock and roll. Now, I know there are some of you out there who are thinking to yourself, what's an album cover? And to you, I would say, it's kind of like a CD cover. And some of you are saying, what's a CD? And to you, I say, shut up. So I'm going to show you some famous album covers. A Rolling Stone magazine had a art history kind of thing, and they said, what's the most famous album cover in the history of album covers? I'm going to show you a few and see if you can recognize any of them. Here's the first one. Anybody recognize this one? Yep. The Beatles, Abbey Road, kind of famous. Why is Paul not wearing any shoes? I don't know. Paul, put some shoes on. You're too valuable. You don't want to get a paper cut and die. Step on some glass. All right, another famous one. Anybody remember this from the 80s? The Boss. Right, there he is. That's his. This album cover came because someone said, I'd like to see Bruce Springsteen, but that was such a stupid joke. I'm so sorry. 90s. All right, one of my favorite albums of all time. Any 90s hip-hop fans? Yeah, throw them up. All right. Biggie, right? Juxtaposing the message with this beautiful baby boy. And then one of the most famous album covers in rock history. This one. Anybody? Nirvana's Nevermind. Some of you are like, I don't think it's right that you show a naked baby on the screen in church. I don't think we should have penises in church. I don't think that's right. They actually reshot this photo. The kid's now a little bit older. This is him today. That makes me feel so old. I just want to give up. Anyway, back to this is, by all rock historians and art historians' account, this is the most famous album cover in the history of album covers. Here it is. Anybody recognize it? Yeah, Pink Floyd. I'm always a little nervous when somebody's like, oh man, I love Pink Floyd. Because it means, you probably did drugs. I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong, and you know it. I'm not wrong. All right, Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. One of the most famous album covers in all of rock. And I think, here's why I think this is important. This is actually a beautiful articulation of the Bible. Stay with me. That white line that kind of comes in there, that represents the Old Testament. God's work in human history through the Old Testament. It is a beautiful articulation. It is from a source, the sun, that is beautiful. It contains all sorts of beautiful light, and it illuminates who God is, what he's like. And in that, it's the Old Testament. It's God's interactions with Abraham, Isaac, In Jacob, it's his laws, it's his prophets, it's his interaction with the nation of Israel. There is so much, and it shows us what God is like. And that's the Old Testament, beautiful and bright and illuminating. And then in the middle of the screen, the biggest thing on this album cover and the most important thing in the narrative of Scripture is this prism, and the prism is Christ. Jesus Christ, the one who has come to articulate what God is like. The very essence of God himself in human form. Emmanuel, God with us. And there, Jesus takes the Old Testament and he refracts it, pulls it apart in glorious beauty to illuminate and show what God is like and what's in there. He pulls it apart. He highlights things that were henceforth invisible to us. He intensifies some beams and dissipates others. But he pulls it apart to show it. Now, some thoughts real quick. Some people say, I don't think we need that Old Testament. To which I would say, people say, let's just start with Jesus and just study that. You need that light. Do you see it? It doesn't really work without it. Now, some people say we need to unhinge ourselves from the Old Testament. I think that's the wrong word. Unhinge is the wrong word. I think Jesus reclarifies and interprets and intensifies and diffuses. But it's important. And then other people say, well, 2,000 years have passed. I mean, come on, we are so much smarter as humans. It's time for us to rediffuse Jesus' teachings. So we need to be a new prism on that light, to which I would say, you're not a prism. There's only one prism. It's Jesus, that's it. I'm not a prism. You're not a prism. Nobody's a prism. I was sharing this analogy, and this guy came up, and he's like, I got 2 doctorates in light. I was like, you have a doctorate in light? He's like, 2. He's like, I work with prisms all day long. I said, really? He said, yes. Here's something you need to know. Once you diffuse light through a prism, there is no way to diffuse it again through another prism. It just doesn't work that way. And I said, wow, you have used your incredible nerdery to show a theological point. Thank you, geek nerd. Thank you for blessing the world with your knowledge. What, is he going to punch me? He's a geek nerd. Nah. I'm kidding. Don't write me. The point is, this is what it is. Now, let me show you how this works. In the Old Testament, for example, there's a commandment against adultery. Adultery is bad. Adultery is things is spoken against. And Jesus says, yes, yes, yes. But Jesus takes that light and breaks it apart and says, no, it's not just about adultery. It's about having lust inside your heart. That's actually the root of adultery. Do you see what Jesus does? He takes an idea and he diffuses it and shows what's inside of it. In the Old Testament, another example, it says, do not murder. Right? This is the thing. Don't murder. Don't kill other people. This is bad. This is bad. Jesus says, no. It's not just about murder. It's about having contempt in your heart for your brother, your sister, another human. And that is the seed of murder, see? Jesus is tearing the Old Testament and showing us all the beauty within it. Now, here's the weird thing. In the Old Testament, one of the primary ideas, one of the primary themes, if we had to make a list of the top 5 ideas in the Old Testament, the top 3 ideas, this would definitely make the cut. It's the idea of idolatry, idols, idol worship. Jesus doesn't speak about idols, hardly at all. It just disappears. In the Old Testament, it's all over the place, right? It's all over. In the New Testament, it's almost gone. Why? Because Jesus doesn't talk about idolatry, but he does talk about money. Because money is the primary idol now. The primary means by which people give their primary allegiance to control the world. Because that's what an idol is. The world's scary. The world is frightening. Things don't work out. We know we're not in control, just instinctively. So what do? We go to an idol for hope that perhaps things will turn out. And we sacrifice things. Maybe rains will come and we will be saved. Maybe this thing will make the sea calm down. And maybe if I sacrifice myself to money, then I'll have what I need. It's the new primary idol. So for Jesus, idolatry and greed and coveting are all kind of mixed together. You see, for Jesus, money is actually a very dangerous spiritual threat. It's not dangerous in and of itself per se. It's dangerous because of what it can do to us It's dangerous because it's a Rorschach test that reveals not money itself, but what is going on in the hearts of a person when they really want money. It has to do with idolatry somehow. That somehow idolatry and coveting and greed and money are all mixed together in this toxic thing that can be really dangerous for us if we don't pay attention. Now, here's something weird about money. Money can destroy you, and you know this, whether you have it or you don't. This is weird about money. It can destroy you whether you have it or not. If you have it, here's why it's dangerous. It can lead you to arrogance. You can begin believing that you're a good person and you're better than people who don't have it. It can lead to pride, which in the words of Yogi Berra, you go through life on third base, born on third base, thinking you hit a triple. And you begin looking down on other people. It can lead to pride. It can lead to self-reliance, because money can solve an awful lot of problems, but it can't solve every problem. But we're not getting there. It can solve a lot of problems, so you can begin thinking, well, I can solve all the problems. It can lead to control issues. In a scary world, money can make a lot of problems go away, but it can't make every problem go away, but you think it can. And so you begin thinking, maybe I'm the one in control. And if I had more money, then I would have more control. And it can lead to an insatiable lust for more. And do you see how dangerous that word is, more? How much is enough with more? Never. I'll be happy when I have more. Is that ever going to end? That's a treadmill that will destroy you. So more is an indefinite point that will lead us to ruin. And this is what money can do. Do you see? But that's with money. Without it, it's also bad. It can lead to jealousy. It can lead to you to look at other people and say, I am jealous of what you have, and I'm kind of mad about it, and I wish I had it. And it can lead, that jealousy can actually lead to murderous envy. This is why a lot of wars, a lot of conflicts exist, because I'm jealous of your resources that you have, and I want to take them. This is what the human heart does. It can lead to bitterness, both toward your brother or sister and toward God himself. Why don't I have that? Why didn't you give me that? I mean, look at that guy. That guy doesn't even love you. He doesn't even care about you. He doesn't give two rips about you. And he's got all this money, and I've got nothing. God, you're holding out on me. It can lead to that kind of terrible bitterness. It can lead to worry and anxiety because you don't know what to do. And so all of a sudden, worry and anxiety are constant companions. This is death to your spiritual soul. And it can lead actually to overworking. You begin to work to try to get money so that you can finally be secure, thinking that that's what will finally solve your problems. Do you see how with or without money it can be deadly spiritually? This is a big problem. But it goes even deeper. It's not just about that, it goes even deeper. Because again, coveting is about not a behavior, but about your heart. So it goes to the deepest parts of what you believe as a human and what you trust in. This is why Jesus links it to idolatry. Look what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6. He even says this. He says, man cannot serve two masters. For either hate one and love the other, or will be devoted to one and despise the other. And then he says this, and it would be good for us to pay attention. You cannot serve my Father, Yahweh, and money. He makes money in this verse, he makes it a god that rivals the devotion that some people have toward Yahweh. He says you can't serve them both. You can't trust in one and trust in one. He says money makes a terrible master, a terrible god. This is not an anti-money sermon. Money is amoral. But do you see how it's tied up into all these things because it's tied up into our hearts? Humans can take benign things and turn them into very dangerous things. Do you see? So what do we do? There's another verse that Jesus says in Luke 12. Jesus said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. He goes on to tell the story about the guy who built all the silos, and then that night he dies. Remember that story? That's a fun story, and at the end of it, Jesus is like, and then everyone died. It's like, gee, thanks, Jesus, for the upper, you know? Jesus is trying to make a point, right? That's what he's saying. I love this. Watch out. Be on your guard. He doesn't say this about adultery. He doesn't say, hey, watch out that you don't accidentally commit adultery. He doesn't say, watch out you don't steal from your neighbor. Watch out that you don't actually go into a courtroom and make up a story to benefit against your brother. He doesn't say that. Why does he say, watch out? Because he's saying in this one, those other examples, we know when we're doing them. It's not a surprise. It's not like, whoops. We do it on purpose. But this one, greed, coveting, money, becoming an idol, is invisible to us. It sneaks up like a tiger. Before we know it, we're in its jaws. Tim Keller, who's a famous, wonderful pastor out of New York City. New York City deals with some of the same issues that Silicon Valley does. Money, jobs, huge populations. I mean, all sorts of, it's kind of similar climates, right? Microclimates, culturally. And he says, I've been a pastor for years. I've dealt with every issue. Adultery and marriage breakdown and worry and depression and anxiety, all sorts of stuff. People come to me for everything. No one's ever come to me and said, you know what my problem is? Greed. It's invisible to us. Greed's invisible. We can't even see it. Jesus says, watch out. So what do? What in the world are we to do with this? How can we do it? Because, see, money is a Rorschach test. Money is amoral, but it reveals what's going on inside of us. That's why idolatry and greed and coveting and money are all mixed together in this really weird, dangerous spiritual stew, because it's a Rorschach test. Some people grab money so that they can be secure. Some people grab money so they can have comfort. Some people grab money so they can look good and have fame. Some people grab it for power. Do you see how money can be dangerous to all sorts of different people for all sorts of different reasons? In fact, when you fantasize about winning the lottery, anybody else? No, just me? Okay. There was a Powerball that was like $590 million or something like that. It was sold in San Jose. And I texted all my friends, like, if it was you, let me know. Our time is now, you know? And you start thinking, what would I do with 50 million, 100 million? And you start daydreaming. Oftentimes, when we daydream, our hearts are untethered from God in all ways. And what we daydream most about is usually what our idol is. Money reveals our brokenness. It is to be submitted to God, with God, not to become a God. So how in the world do we get free? That's the danger. That's the thing that's going to destroy us. This is why it's so bad. How do we get free? So I started thinking and reflecting on this, and I was thinking about this, like, how do I have a greed problem? So at preparation, I was just like thinking about this, and I immediately thought to myself, other people have greed problems, but not me, because I'm stupid. Again, that's just what we do, right? I started thinking about all the people who have greed problems. And you know what? They're all billionaires. So those billionaires have greed problems. So I'm literally like blind to it. Greed is really idolatry of money. And an idol is this. An idol is this. This is the definition of an idol. An idol says, if I have that, then I'll feel like my life has meaning. And then I'll know I have value. And then I'll feel significant, or I'll feel secure. That's what an idol is. So if it's true, Jesus says, watch out. And he commands and offers to do a deep dive with me to make sure that I don't have these issues. And then he offers for me to go with him. He says, follow me to this young man a couple times. Follow me, follow me. If that's his invitation, it would be good for me to go along. So I looked at all sorts of spiritual directors, and I looked at all sorts of books. And these are 3 questions that have helped me to reveal if I have coveting issues. Now, mileage may vary. Some of them might not apply to you, but my prayer is that as we go through these, because it's never about money. I mean, sometimes it is, but it's hardly ever, it's about what money represents. Does that make sense? So here's how I get to the core of what money represents. These are 3 questions, 3 statements that if I start to say them, I know I'm in trouble. Number 1, God, when I say to God, God, I wish you had made me different. When I start comparing myself to other people, when I start becoming dissatisfied with who God's made me to be, wishing I had that man's this or this woman's that. And this is really hard because I work on a staff with a lot of talented people. And so it's easy to get creative envy, right? You say, why can't I have that person's leadership gift? I mean, they see around corners. They can see in the future. They have instincts I don't even understand. Why can't I have that? That would be really helpful. Or that person's creativity. Why can't I have their creativity? They never stop thinking about this stuff. And I'm just jealous. That person's worship leading ability. They're so musical. They wear skinny jeans. They're so cool. I wish I could be that cool. And you start saying to God, you shake your fist, you say, God, why did you make me the way? Why did you just have to make me incredibly sexy? I'm a little discouraged that the first person to laugh was my wife, but anyway. The point is, when you start comparing yourself, it's dangerous. Now, I've seen this. I was a pastor and a youth pastor for years. I saw this with kids all the time. There's two population groups I'm going to talk about that I think are especially at risk in this. And the first was young ladies. I don't know if it's the comparison thing that goes on. I don't know if it's what they see in magazines or on television or Instagram, the perfection and the Photoshopness. But I saw almost chronic dissatisfaction with the way that God had created them, especially in their bodies, again and again and again. It was super destructive. Even the most beautiful young ladies would say, there's something wrong with me. When I look in the mirror, I do not like what I see. It's just death. And we have to do all this work to say again and again, with the help of the Holy Spirit, God has knit you together in your mother's womb. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are a beloved child of the Most High God. You are beautiful and radiant, and God has made you perfectly. We have to combat that lie 1,000 times, a million times. The other group that I saw over and over again is I worked with a lot of first and second generation Americans from traditional cultures. And this was death too, because they would say, you don't understand, Dave, when I walk into a room, my family, my culture, they have a standard, they have an ideal, and I can never live up to it, because I know deep in my heart that I'm not that good. I can't meet that. And I will die trying to make my parents or my family or my culture proud, and I don't have it in me. They only value being a thoroughbred racehorse and running that fast, and I'm a monkey. And I can't run that fast. I'm a monkey. But I'm going to try. And that comparison and that sense of I'll never measure up and I'll never be good enough, those voices, that's death. It's death. God, I wish you made me different. The other sentence I say to myself that I know I've got a big problem with, God, what you've given me isn't enough. Now, sometimes this is petty stuff. It has to do with materialistic stuff and money and stuff. Sometimes it's that. And that can be a real issue. That's a real human dysfunction. And it might be that for you. But for me, most of the time, I don't really covet other people's stuff. Like, my friend gets a boat. I don't want a boat. You know where would I store it? All that upkeep. I don't need a boat. I just need a friend with a boat. That's truth. I don't need a cabin in Tahoe. I need a friend with a cabin in Tahoe. But where it gets me is platform and job success. Why can't I be that successful? Oh man, that's death to me. I look at other people who just, why does Kim Kardashian have that many Twitter followers? I'm just jealous. What is she saying that she's not saying? I just get angry and jealous. I wish I had that. That person gets that promotion. Why did they get the promotion? That person gets that platform. Why did they get that? That comparison stuff is death. And that's when I know I go into ingratitude and I start overlooking the very things in front of me that other people would literally kill for. And all of a sudden my heart turns weird on what I don't have. And I overlook the very gifts that I do. You ever done that? You ever done that? That's me. And the last question, and this is, I'm going to come off as trite, and I do not mean to come off as trite, but the words I'm going to say are going to seem trite, and I don't know how else to say them. This happens to me. This has happened so many times as a pastor. But when I start to say, God, you aren't enough. Whenever I say, God, I need this to be happy, whatever the this is usually my idol. And I'm not talking about, God, I need a wave runner to be happy. I mean, I'm not that shallow. But when people come up to me and they say, I'm not married yet and I need a spouse, this is hard for me because marriage is a good thing. It's a gift. It's a good gift from God. That's not a bad thing. You're not shallow because you desperately want to be married. But when you say, I need a spouse to be happy, I have to say, time out. That's not what Jesus says. You don't need anything else to be fully happy with God. You don't need anything else. And that, to an unmarried person, that seems like trite. It's easy for you to say you're married. Or that couple comes up and says, we want kids. It's not bad. That's good. We need kids to be happy. All of a sudden, it takes a weird turn. Do you see? I need this to be happy. Whatever this is, that can be your idol. And you're using God and praying to God, hoping that He gives you this. But in the reality, if you had this and not Him, you'd be fine with it. And that's a problem. Because we're not meant to live that way. Jesus plus nothing equals everything, according to Scripture. That's what Jesus teaches. My Father, relationship with Him, plus nothing equals everything. Jesus emptied Himself of all the good things He had, came down to earth, was spit on and beaten, abused, tortured, and killed. Because His Father plus nothing equaled everything. That's the lesson of Jesus. And I don't believe it. Not all the time. I don't. Maybe you don't either. How do we get free of this? There's a story that has helped me. I'm going to close with this. It's a story about, it's in John 21. It's toward the end of the book of John, where John's account, which is a beautiful account of Jesus and His deity, but it's also an account of what Jesus did in His best friend Peter. And John is a theologian, but he's a poet. He tells this beautiful story about Jesus' work with his good friend Peter, who go on to be monumentally important in the church. But Peter is a mess for most of it, right? And there's this moment where Jesus is about to be betrayed and about to be crucified, and Peter denies Him 3 times in this colossal failure. And after Jesus is resurrected, He comes and finds Peter, who's gone back to fishing because he's given up. And Jesus finds him and invites him to a meal, which is just so Jesus. And He says to him 3 times, Peter, do you love me? Because I think in Jesus' economy, -3 plus +3 equals 0, fresh start. But the 3rd time, Jesus asked Peter point blank, do you love me? Peter's grieved. And he says with great vulnerability, you know I do. God, you know, Jesus, you know I do. And there's this incredible moment between Jesus and Peter where Jesus says, I know, Peter, I know that you do. In fact, I got to tell you something about us, Peter. Someday, they're going to lead you up a hill you don't want to go up. Just like they led me up a hill I didn't want to go up. And they're going to dress you in clothes you don't want to be dressed in, just like they dressed me in clothes. And they're going to stretch out your arms like they stretched out mine. Peter, you're going to die a cruel crucifixion just like me. I'm going to be with you, but that's something we're going to share, Peter. That's between you and me. We're going to share that. And in that moment, the very first thing that Peter does is he looks and he sees his friend John walking by, and he says, well, what about that guy? Yeah, he going to get cruelly killed too? Because our default setting is comparison. That's just what we do. We compare. And Jesus does something incredibly gentle and incredibly firm in that moment to Peter. He says, don't compare. Don't compare your story to somebody else's story. You have no idea what I'm doing with John. No idea what I'm doing in his life. No idea what our relationship is like. We have no idea. Do not compare yourself to John. Completely different humans, completely different stories. I have something for you, Peter. You particularly. It's you and me, and it's a private story with you and me. Do not compare yourself to John. Do not concern yourself with what I'm doing in here. That is not your mail to open. I have a relationship with you. Concentrate on me and you, and that's it. Do not worry about other people. I've got other things I'm doing you don't even know. You couldn't even know. So stop trying to figure it out. Concentrate instead on what I'm doing with you. You and me, Peter. And then he says, follow me. Follow me. He says it 3 times. And the beauty of this story is Jesus made the invitation to follow me to the rich young ruler, and he turned and walked away. But when he made the invitation to Peter, Peter turned and walked with Jesus, even into death. And that's the beauty. Follow me, Peter. It's not about other people, what they have or what they don't, what they do and what they don't. God's got his own thing with them. Let God be concerned about those people. You worry about yourself and Jesus. So these 3 problems, these 3 statements. I'm going to read 3 statements that have helped me. And sometimes I journal them and write them down. Sometimes I just need to pray them. But for me, these are big. And they've helped me. I'm going to share them, and maybe one of them will resonate with you. Maybe one of them will prick that nerve where you say, God, I need to do business with you on this one. 3 prayers that destroy coveting. Number 1, God, how you made me is enough. How you made. You didn't make mistakes. I'm not slapped together accidentally. I am knit like a masterpiece created in my mother's womb, which you knew and you did. And I'm different and I am unique. And that's just who I am. God's family is not living bricks. We are living stones. And there is a difference. How you made me is enough. Help me be the best me I can be. Not somebody else. The best me, the one you made. Number 2, God, what you gave me is enough. I don't need a wider reputation. I don't need more. I will faithfully plow the plot of land you have given to me. I will love those who are in front of me. And I will be careful and quick to be grateful for that which you have given me. And if you choose to give me more, I will be faithful with that. But if you do not, I will be faithful with the plot of land you've given to me. I have enough. I have what I need. And I trust you know my future and my past, and you will give me what I need. I trust you. And then lastly, you and me, God, that's enough. I don't always believe this, but this is the invitation of Jesus. That somehow, Jesus plus nothing equals everything. And everything minus Jesus equals nothing. So we'll put those 3 up there and maybe see if one of them hits you. And we'll just spend a minute here just reflecting in silence with God. Maybe you need to pray one this morning to begin the process of getting free. Please involve Jesus because he wants to free us. Don't turn and walk away, but turn to the one who will never walk away. Let's pray. Jesus, I pray you would do the work that you need to do. With your Spirit, whisper the words that we need to hear. How you made us is enough. What you've given us is enough. you are enough.